Basically, last week I sort of did this speed painting where I was creating a logo for one of my friends, her YouTube channel. And with that being said, I didn't quite love it, but let's sort of, talk this out a little bit over tea and breakfast. So, getting up, I decided to be a monster and put my milk and tea bag first before the hot water. That's a mistake. Don't do that. I don't know what I was thinking, but I felt like being a monster apparently. Anyways, essentially, the whole idea of this video would be to show the process of making this logo. More specifically, I wanted to show the process of making handwritten text, try out some, film stuff type thing, work on my video editing game, and change the direction of this channel a bit away from digital drawing and to do something more in person in real life. I sort of love vlog style videos and whatnot. Cringe maybe, but I just really like those aesthetic videos. And I don't know if I will quite shift in that direction 100%, but I do like the idea of having some in person footage behind the scenes. So, yeah. I wanted to create a Victorian style, sort of that very detailed type of design work for her logos because that's sort of the personality that I think of when I think of Courtney. I think of Victorian style, classy, elegant type things come to mind. So I wanted to sort of push that, especially since she loves the old fashioned Victorian ways and sort of vintage stuff and antiques. So it just really suited her as a person. And, it's sort of the job of the logo and banners and whatnot, especially on YouTube, to capture what that person is like. So this could have gone one of two ways. I could have done it by digital means, completely do it in a vector-based program like Illustrator and go from there. But I like doing Victorian style text and stuff by hand, especially first. That way I can sort of fit things better compositionally, sort of tweak fonts and whatnot to make it more one of a kind, organic, authentic type feeling. It's really cool to do Victorian style fonts. I will return to it and do it again. For the time being, though, this was sort of a quick project for me. It's like a favor type thing, a bit of a challenge, and sort of stretching before I actually do other projects. I've been wanting to really work on my portfolio, even though we will have courses to do that next year before our job term. I sort of want a backbone at least that way. I have an idea and I have some projects that I could put in that I don't want to say can compete with my classmates, but basically can compete with my classmates. Stay tuned for those videos. I do have one that will probably be a series, just because it's a lot of work to do the sort of projects that I plan on doing in the future. So yeah. I am making some guides though. I do a few things in this that sort of helps with the process of making Victorian style fonts. For one, I make guides just so I have lines that I can follow, and I will be using a light box. It's not really a box, but it makes me able to trace things better. So I use a light box to sort of help guide my letters so then they're a bit more consistent and I want to say a bit more perfect or thought out rather than having them misshapen and whatnot. I try my best to keep them consistent. If I was to do this again, I would make a different style grid. Instead of focusing on ovals or ellipses, I would probably focus on making the lines parallel but also curvy instead. That way my letters are the same size all around. I would also probably change the style of filigree as well, maybe go more box shape than oval. So yeah, printing out guides is fun. My desk is a mess. But you know what? It's okay. I said I would organize it. I still haven't gotten around to that. It's been a month. I've just been a bit busy. I had family visiting, so things outside of school was sort of put onto the back burner, and hopefully it's not setting fire to the house. Anyways, so I print out guides and then I used tracing a light box to trace it. And I sort of do this several times just because there are some tiny little changes you make midway through tracing. And then you also have different versions that you're like, maybe I prefer this better or this better. Like, do I prefer round serifs versus regular serifs, or perhaps I want to keep both serifs, and you try to sort of tie in all of the lettering because you're doing it by hand together so then it looks like it came from the same person, or it's during, it looks uniformed and consistent throughout. Maybe not ideal to do this by hand. Maybe doing it by a vector would have been a lot easier, but there are a few things done by hand that can't quite be mimicked as nicely in a vector. The texture by is an example. Doing things with a pencil on paper just gives off a different texture and feel than doing it digitally. Most people draws digitally from their iPads or from a drawing tablet. I have basically a drawing tablet. It's glorified. It's wonderful. It's my baby. Damn right it's my baby. It costs as much as my college tuition. Almost. Anyways, I just find that the screen is too smooth for my stylus, so that it sort of makes me give up control in exchange for something else, which in some cases it's great to do vector based or digitalize it. It's smoother in some ways, or it's easier to fix mistakes, which is why I do end up using a bit of a digital program. I use Photoshop to sort of stitch things together and make the composition look a bit better. So then that way I could trace again with a pencil and then see how I feel and make more adjustments that way, rather than trying to do this all digitally or all by hand. I go through a lot of copies. I don't know. I'm not much of a math guy. Uh, I had to. But yeah, so it's a lot of tracing and a lot of patience, but once you really get into it, it's sort of easy because you are just tracing. At times, this light box does make it a bit difficult to see what I'm tracing, just because the color, it's graphite, I'm doing black on black, and also it's going through like three sheets of paper. That's my fault. Sorry, light box. But it probably doesn't help that there's this weird grid thing on the back of it. I'm pretty sure the ones at school doesn't have that texture there, but oh well. And then I whip out, traditional pencils. If you, well, you probably don't. If you do know me in real life, which is very slim, it's like 2 out of 50 people that are subscribed. If you know me in real life, I tend to use mechanical pencils. It just keeps the sharp edge longer. And usually, since I'm using a smudging stump, it sort of, I have good pencil control. Is that bragging? Um, I just I love mechanical pencils because it stays pointy. It's fairly versatile for me, and I don't have to sharpen it so often because I draw a lot. But the thing about using traditional pencils is that they do have a lot of different hardness in one package. So I don't know if there's a way. They come in different shades. But they have the B series, which is, very soft and it comes out very dark and doesn't need a lot of pressure to make it that dark. Well, you also have the harder series, which is like the H's and even the E's that are very light, and they're good for, that initial sketch. So I do use traditional pencils just because of that, and because I want that light sketch so then I can turn off the light box and sort of refine it a bit more. Um, so yeah, I think the process was fairly interesting. I do end up taking it into Photoshop and sort of doing it again by using the digital medium. but I still like the traditional more just because of the texture once again and just how things are formatted. It makes me feel a lot. I don't know, it feels more vintage, real, and I have more control. Am I a control freak? Yes, I am. Reasons why I don't do drugs or drink alcohol is because I'm a major control freak and I am worried that I won't think properly under the influence. This is fine. Anyways, so it's a lot of tracing and whatnot. I do want to do a few different things in the future with this. I will do Victorian style again. You know, you live and you learn. And if someone's out there who happens to be a specialist in handwritten text, feel free to leave me a comment down below about your process. And maybe if you have a channel, I'll check it out. Because we did have a speaker who came in about handwritten text, and it was very interesting. I like the idea of it. Uh, would I do it again? Absolutely. So I don't know. Maybe that will be not a specialty of mine, but a service that I will offer people. My favorite letters throughout this whole thing, by the way, would be the F. It's just so nice. And even though I've done it so many different times in a few different ways and tweaked it a bit, it's just still my favorite part of the whole logo, just because of how it flows and the big swoops and swirls that they have, and sort of making the filigree sprout from it. It feels really nice. And the other thing that I'm really proud of this piece in general would be the filigree that I do around the border. It's not because I like the composition necessarily. I just used to find filigree so difficult to do, but I've learned that it deals a lot with the shading of it and the line work of it. So for filigree to make it look really nice and do that 3D effect, you need to have proper shading for it, because initially I would assume, this is the reason why, I believe initially it would be carvings or impressions, so a 3D thing, and to make 3D things look good, you need to have proper shading and to have that contrast. So yeah, shading really helps when it comes to filigree. Um, is there anything else? I don't think there is. I will talk actually a bit more about my friend's channel if you want to go and support her. She does, uh, not necessarily time lapse. She does about 1 hour, 2 hour videos of her hobbies, and her hobbies aren't really the typical hobbies, especially for a 20 something years old. I say that because she's sort of into that very interesting, like, antique things like crocheting, cross stitching, embroidery, and whatnot. Please don't give me backlash. I know people still do those nowadays. I still do those nowadays, but she records them. And she's very meticulous in a way, so it just is a lot more satisfying to watch her do it than when I do it. That's the truth. But yeah, if you're interested in those things, or if you're interested in maybe you want to think about starting it, maybe you want to start doing those type of things and needs a companion, that's a good channel to sort of go to. She's starting fresh, and that's why we're sort of doing these different designs, especially for her so-called logo. It's for her banner, actually. But yeah, if you want to sort of see the banner, perhaps check out her video so that you can sort of see my handiwork. But yeah, if I have more time, I definitely want to come back to this and sort of do it traditionally rather than digitally, just so I keep that and then have fun with the filigree that way. But for something that is completed within like 2 days, basically, I am pretty happy with it. I know I've tried handwritten text before for a logo design. It was a day project, so we had 5 hours to complete it. I couldn't though because when I took the scan, well, we couldn't do a scan because our scanner in the class was broken. So I tried to take a picture and go from there. It didn't really work out, just because once again, there's this sort of distance between digital and traditional that I know for sure Adobe doesn't quite have a grasp on for Illustrator, and usually our assets such as logos should be done with a vector. It's easier to render out. It's takes up less storage, and sizing it is a lot better since it's sort of a mathematic vector program. It's sort of, that is exactly what it is. It will scale things better and it will be less likely to be pixely versus rasterized image, which is digital paintings and whatnot, typically speaking. But yeah, so there are things that I also want to try. This is something that I want to keep working on, and I really do hope you guys enjoy this different style of videos. Um, I just wanted to try new things and sort of get my hand on editing videos a bit better. I have to pick up Premiere Pro. I did this in DaVinci Resolve, but there are some things that you need to buy when it comes to DaVinci Resolve. So yeah, unfortunate, but I do need to learn Premiere Pro anyways, just because of the field. And the industry sort of prefers Adobe over a lot of things right now, question mark. I think it's partially because of the province that I'm in. Um, I'm not saying that they're a bit slow, but I am saying that a lot of the industries over here prefers Mac, and there are some industries elsewhere that doesn't really prefer Mac. So yeah. Hmm. Anyways, I do a lot of copies though. I think eventually I show them. I have sketchbook thumbnails. That's always important to the design or creative process. No matter what you do, I suggest you to always sketch ideas out first before you render them. And I have a lot of tracings that I did just because, graphite makes things messy at times, and you can't have too much graphite when you go to scan these in just because it will show up on the scan and it doesn't look nice that way. So yeah, here are 4 of them, and then I do give you spoilers for Sketchbook. But yeah, I do a lot of, sorry for the blurry focus, but yeah, I do several different versions of it, and then I also have guides made for it. I think I have 4 different guides or something like that, but that's my favorite one, by the way. Just that really clean on the single one on a single piece of paper. I think that's the one that I sort of go off of. Um, and we do change the filigree. That's sort of also the nice thing sketching. I had no idea how to do the filigree around it or how to border this up. It was initially just going to be a simple little like end pattern type thing. But I actually end up doing sort of a border with peacock feathers and calligraphy pen tips just because it just quills, feathers, it makes me think of quills, and antique stuff also makes me think of quills, but also quills don't necessarily look the way that you'd think they'd look, so I wanted to do something a bit more fancy, like a fountain pen tip. And we also incorporate peacock feathers just because that's sort of her favorite board. It's her favorite board. Anyways, so yeah, I chose to do that, and then I also chose color schemes relating to peacocks. It's like 2 greens, 2 blues, and sort of a teal color slash or an indigo color, I guess. But yeah, it's a lot of scanning and whatnot when it comes to handwritten text. But I liked making her brand guideline too. I chose fonts and everything. There's this really cool presentation and whatnot. But yeah, I'm tracing the final one here. It For the most part, it does look fine, and I do adjust some things like I believe that's called kerning. I adjust the spacing between the letters by sliding things over because I found that the heights were all right, and I'm gonna fix that in Photoshop anyways because I traced this in Photoshop. But yeah, I just like the traditional a lot better because of the shading and whatnot and that hand feeling, but it's okay. It is what it is. And if I ever want to come back to it, I know she'll let me come back to it, and I know that I'll still have fun redoing the project. So, yeah. Like I mentioned before, when you scan it in, you do get a lot of different textures, especially if you're smudging graphite everywhere. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm left handed. It still happens for right handed people, but our intuition is like, hey, you know what? Start from the left, right to the right. Start from the left, go to the right. So yeah, we tend to smudge things a lot, but I think artists in general, no matter which hand they use, they still have a lot of smudginess. Unless they use a smudge guard or they use a piece of paper under the work or they have a bar thing that goes and you just sort of paint and roll with that and it keeps your hand off the painting. But yeah, so I do some adjustments. I like the idea of adding those little ticks and like details in the lettering. It sort of unifies them a bit better than what I initially had. And I sort of wish to do something different with the ampersands, also known as the and symbol. I learned that this year. No, I'm not an idiot. I just forget things, and when you don't use things, you forget them as well. Crazy. Yeah, I sort of wish to make that smaller or sort of incorporate that a bit better into the logo. It just sort of feels like a separate entity, which is unfortunate, but it'll be okay for a 2-day logo. Um, I'm not sure how many people will see. 50 people. No. At least I know for sure 3 people will see this. Anyways, thinking, pondering, adding some more details. And I adjust things like I promised I would. I adjust things very frequently because the longer you go on, the more blind you become, and when you come back from a little break, you start to notice things. I felt like, yeah, those things were a bit too tall. That would have been where I should have used a different guide with parallel things, sort of following the flow of how I wanted the shapes to go, but I didn't. I'm sketching out the filigree now. I sort of want to add that peacock detail. And while I was doing the final filigree, first off, I learned how to find the symmetry tool in Photoshop. It was tricky for me because I had the wrong thing selected and it wouldn't appear in the option bar. I used 3 different YouTube videos to try to figure out how the heck do I make symmetry here. The other thing I learned was that this isn't completely symmetrical. When I tried to use the symmetry tool, I found out that my filigree would go into the letters on the left side. Not ideal, so I do make some adjustments to remedy that, we'll say. That's the other thing about doing handwritten text. It's really nice when you do it by hand because you could slot things so then it looks symmetry from a distance, but it's slightly different so that it just hugs the shape a lot better in that way. But yeah, watch me struggle with symmetry tools. First, I thought it was the path thing. It wasn't. I found out that if you click either on the eraser tool or the brush tool, I think there's also one other tool that enables this. There is a butterfly symbol that appears, and then you just click that, click symmetry on, choose how you want it to be symmetrical, and then you're set to go. Here are those peacock feathers. Personally, so I have a few different versions. There's the Medibang version, which is that very first one, which I created the whole video about. You could check it out again in the info card, I believe, or just on my channel. And then there is the traditional one. That one's incomplete, but I love the text. I love the type for that so much, so I will put that as an option. There is the Photoshop version. I think that's the second best version, in my opinion. And then there's also the Illustrator version, which unfortunately I did live trace it because I was like, I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but I also needed to change the colors to fit. So yeah, that is all that I have for you guys, though, for today. I will leave the 4 different versions up just so you can check them out and give me your opinion about them in the comments down below. Which one do you like the best? Which one did you like the least? I know there are some things that I would do differently in the future, but that is a future problem for me. And I hope you guys sort of enjoyed this different style of videos. I do enjoy filming things. Not well, but It's something to learn. And yeah, have a great day. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and I hope I'll see you in the next video. Bye.